Thank you very much, Mark. It's my pleasure to be part of this great virtual symposium. I'm exceedingly grateful for the opportunity. And of course, we pay gratitude, grateful thanks to the sponsors and the organizers, of course, NAMPOT and the SADC Secretariat. My presentation here, enhancing economic collaboration in the new normal, I'm going to focus on the commitment that we have had and the zeal that we've had as the Walvis Bay Corridor Group, the Walvis Bay Ndola Lubumbashi Development Corridor, in addressing the various non-tariff barriers, and of course looking at the challenges which of course have been well documented before the COVID-19, and of course during the COVID-19, the non-tariff barriers have certainly taken a transformative process. And then, of course, we're looking at opportunities and how we are collaborating with other stakeholders in addressing the various non-tariff barriers. And then, of course, in winding up, I would like to look at the way forward on the issues for reflection. So to start, Mark, I would like to just give a brief introduction about who we are as the Walvis Bay Corridor Group. The Walvis Bay Corridor Group, as you may be aware, is a non-profit making organization which was established in the year 2000 in the Republic of Namibia. And of course, it is based on it is structured on the unique public-private partnership, meaning that there are signages which have been built between the regulators, the public sector, and of course the operators on the private sector on the other hand. So it is a very unique public-private partnership comprising the Walvis Bay Port Users Association, the Container Liners Operators Forum, the Namibia Logistics Association, the Namibia Chambers of Commerce, the Namibian Port Authority, NAMPOT, the Namibia Transporters Association, and the Walvis Bay Municipality itself. And then we also have Trans-Namib Holdings Limited, which is a parastatal railway company in Namibia, the Roads Authority, the Road Fund Administration, the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Small Scale and Medium Enterprises Development, the Ministry of Finance, Department of Customs, and indeed the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is looking at immigration issues. So this public-private partnership is quite unique in the sense that it brings together the regulators and operators in trying to find an integrated logistics and transport solutions for our members and customers. So briefly, if you look at the Walvis Bay Corridor Group, it is also a network of well-integrated road network transport and railway corridors. In this case, we're talking about the Trans-Kalahari Corridor, which is a formation between the Republic of Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And it moves from the port of Walvis Bay all the way through Gaborone to Gauteng in South Africa. And then, of course, the Walvis Bay Ndola Lubumbashi Development Corridor from the port of Walvis Bay through Grootfontein, where we've got transshipment facilities all the way to Kachimamulilo border, Ndola all the way up to Lubumbashi in the DRC. That is between or amongst the DRC, Zambia, and Namibia. And then, of course, the Transkunene corridor, which moves from the Walvis Bay port through to Angola there. And then, of course, the Trans-Orange, which is moves more or less on the other side there, the port of Lüderitz into the Northern Cape of South Africa. So if we look at the service profile and our core functions as the Walvis Bay Corridor Group, we actually offer, our main thrust is cross-border trade and transport facilitation, business development, corridor infrastructure development, and we look also at spatial development initiatives. And then, of course, we do provide platforms and create networks for our stakeholders. We do facilitate policy dialogue and other stakeholder engagements. We also serve as a one-stop trade facilitation center. And then, of course, we do have a well-integrated, well-developed wellness service, which of course looks at this project operates mobile wellness clinics in the Republic of Namibia in order to focus on the well-being or health of our mobile populations or the trucking industry, not only in Namibia, but also in the entire SADC region. And then of course, they do provide, our health workers do provide on-site biometric wellness services screening. And now with the advent of COVID-19, we do also provide services related to COVID-19, such as masks, hand sanitizers, and so on. And of course, we do collaborate with the private sector in this regard. And then of course, we, as Walvis Bay Corridor Group, we also are well positioned. We've been positioned by the Namibian government to coordinate Namibia's logistics hub. As you may know, the National Development Plan 4 and the National Development Plan number 5, as well as the Harambee Prosperity Plans have articulated the goals and aspirations of Namibia to be a logistics hub, at least by the year 2025. And then, of course, we do have a marketing and communications functions as the Walvis Bay Corridor Group. So this is a picture of one of the clinics. This is typical of our mobile clinics, but dotted all around our corridors, our transport and economic corridors in Namibia. And then we do also have an international footprint in terms of business development offices. We have got Windhoek itself, which opened in the year 2000. We've got Lusaka, Zambia office, Johannesburg, South Africa, Lubumbashi office, as well as Sao Paulo, Brazil, which opened in 2012. And then, of course, we have not been able to open offices or impose our footprint in Europe and China, and these are for our future plans. So these are some of the routes, or indeed routes and times taken that the Walvis Bay corridors provide into and out of the SADC region. For example, Angola there you can see 3 to 5 days, Botswana 2 days, and DRC 5 to 6 days, and then Zambia, of course, 3 to 4 days. It is worth mentioning here that, of course, we do have dry ports at the port of Walvis Bay. As you may know that Namibia has recently expanded the port of Walvis Bay, which is managed by Namibia Ports Authority, and of course has increased its handling cargo capacity. And so we do have the Zambian dry port, Botswanan dry port, the Zimbabwean dry port, and now also the Democratic Republic of Congo dry port. So our commitment in this new normal in addressing non-tariff barriers, of course, has been, we have just mobilized ourselves in a very resolute and ambitious manner. We never closed our borders. And so, of course, in addressing our mandate, in addressing non-tariff barriers, we need to collaborate closely with a lot of stakeholders, for example, the customs, immigration, health, agriculture, roads authorities, councils, and of course, many other players involved in the logistics, trade, and transport facilitation. And so when we look at challenges, when you talk about trade facilitation challenges or non-tariff barriers, you realize that, of course, before the advent of COVID-19, we have had a lot of trade facilitation challenges, not only along our corridors, but of course in the entire African continent. And these non-tariff barriers are well documented. For example, when we talk about the quarantine process for truck drivers, that was really delaying the movement of cargo. And then, of course, the staggered workforce at the borders because of social distancing. And then you had shifts, other shifts working from home. You find that the workforce at the borders was reduced. And then, of course, with the advent of COVID-19, you find that there were a lot of checkpoints along the corridors. And this also entailed that delays were exacerbated along the corridors. And then, of course, another important factor is that in this whole process, you find that drivers were stigmatized as vectors or carriers of COVID-19. So a driver plays a very, very important role to deliver our products, our goods and services. And you find that in the cross-border movement, the truck drivers were stigmatized. So you find that transporters also very much experienced tremendous difficulties in the importation and exportation of goods, because you find that various member states in the SADC region were implementing a diverse raft of protocols and COVID-19 guidelines at short notice. And to make matters worse, you find that the private sector, who are the key stakeholders on the ground, were not actually consulted in coming up with a lot of these guidelines. And then, of course, the lack of uniform guidelines that exacerbated. Of course, we will look at how some of these issues have been addressed by our regional economic communities, especially SADC, of course. And the other challenge, of course, that not only is prevalent in our region, but across the African continent is the infrastructure deficit. We find that there are a lot of infrastructural gaps, which of course reduce operational efficiencies and competitiveness along our corridors. And these actually negatively impact on our regional integration efforts. Also, you will find that COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerability of most of African countries, which are dependent on export of commodities, commodity-driven economies. So in terms of border congestion and clearance delays, which has been induced partly because of COVID-19, and of course the existing hard and soft infrastructure issues, you find that some of our borders were created or were built during the colonial period of time and have not been upgraded to cope with the changing times in order to accommodate the increase in cargo volumes or trade volumes passing through these corridors. And then, of course, the limited human and institutional capacities at the same borders. And of course, we have got security challenges. For example, if we have to talk about increasing border operating hours at a border like Kasumbalesa between Zambia and DRC, you find that there is a challenge of security there. And so you cannot really increase the operating hours there at such a border. So apart from security challenges, we also talk about, we look at the cumbersome police checkpoints along our corridors. There are a lot of checkpoints along our corridors. And if we look, for example, during corridor assessment, you find that some of these corridors are not necessary because they are asking for the same things and looking at the same things, and they do delay the movement of traffic along the corridors. You can imagine passing through 21 or 22 checkpoints, and then coupled with that, you also put COVID-19 checkpoints. This greatly affected the movement of goods and services across our borders. And then, of course, just to give some pictorial representation of how some of our road networks are, being experienced by our truck drivers and transporters in the delivery of goods, we have to pass through such roads. This is a stretch between Sesheke and Kazungula, which is about 100 kilometers in such a condition, and this is just during the rainy season. And then, of course, with such bad road conditions or bad road infrastructure, we find that the road safety is highly compromised, and also the security of the drivers, the truck drivers, as well as the high repair costs amongst our transporter and transporting community. And then, of course, border congestion. This is the typical reality that you would find, for example, at Kasumbalesa border post, although this is prevalent, of course, at the beginning of each year. Suffice to say that they've put a fence there, and they're able to park, at least secure all the trucks in one yard, because previously most of these trucks used to park along the roads due to such kind of congestion. And then you can look at this, you find that the cross-border traders or informal cross-border traders have been negatively affected also during COVID-19. And also, of course, we do need to implement simplified trade regimes for them. You can look at this as a case of smuggling on an ungazetted path, but these people, if you look at the positive side, they need to be integrated into the formal sector, and they need to be given an opportunity to simplify and harmonize the trade practices at the borders. This is a typical example. And then when we talk about inadequate infrastructure on border facilities, this is what we are talking about, that our borders are not able to accommodate the traffic, the increase in traffic cargo volumes that we have seen in recent times. And then in terms of infrastructure deficit, this is a typical pontoon at Kazungula border post. This is between Zambia and Botswana, of course, along our corridor. But then, of course, a modern bridge has been built there, and it is awaiting commissioning. And so when we look at opportunities that exist in order to enhance economic integration and, of course, social and economic progress in the region, you find that we have got our regional economic communities like the SADC, the Tripartite Transport and Transit Facilitation Program, which Mr. Bigandandi is going to discuss later on. You find that this is an opportunity for member states, for all countries in the region to harmonize, to sort of develop a more integrated and liberalized transport system in the region. And then, of course, the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area is another opportunity for African countries, not only in the region, but the entire Africa, and boosting intra-African trade due to, of course, the larger market. As you may be aware, the intra-African trade, we've not been trading amongst ourselves, but what we have seen during the COVID-19, because of the disruption of supply chains, global supply chains, we have seen that there's been an increase in intra-African trade in the region. And then, of course, we need to take advantage of electronic rules of origin and other trade facilitation platforms to build capacity in institutions that are involved in transport operations. And then, of course, looking at the online mechanism for monitoring and reporting and eliminating non-tariff barriers. And the need, of course, to integrate lessons learned from COVID-19 to enhance preparedness for future pandemics. And then, of course, in terms of boosting our infrastructure, I think that our regional economic communities, such as the tripartite, when you look at SADC, COMESA, and the East African community, I think that the member states in the tripartite need to push for the program for infrastructure development 2, running from 2020 to 2030, to sort of try and boost or reduce the infrastructural gap that is existent in our regions. And then, of course, we do have robust stakeholder networks, as well as social capital, which forge for stronger partnerships and collaborations in resolution of non-tariff barriers, and of course, in strengthening our regional integration efforts. And then, of course, what we have seen is a less participation of the private sector in infrastructure development, regional infrastructure development. We need a strengthened involvement of the private sector, maybe to go on models on public-private partnerships, build, operate, and transfer models, so that we build durable and safer roads in our regions. And then, of course, we need, to take advantage of the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, technological revolution, which is basically looking at the digital landscape and how we can leverage digital technologies in enhancing our facilitation efforts when we talk about smart borders for seamless trade, travel, and transport. And then, of course, we need other issues like the electronic cargo and driver tracking system, which, of course, could bring about mutually recognizing COVID-19 electronic results, monitoring truck drivers on their mobile applications, how their movement, and of course, promoting the corridor observatory. And we would like to tap in from the SADC corridor trip monitoring system, and then of course, the regional electronic cargo and driver tracking system in East Africa as well. So this provides an economies of scale, and we cannot wait for the SADC Secretariat to roll out this system. This is what we need to be more looking at in terms of developing our infrastructure for the region. We need an integrated development corridor approach for regional integration, which looks at multimodal facilities, railways, roads, ports, as well as bridges and way bridges and so on. And of course, this is a glimpse of the new container terminal of the port of Walvis Bay, which of course has increased throughput, cargo handling capacity. And this is what we need to be looking at. And then of course, this is a Kazungula Bridge between the Republic of Zambia and Botswana, which should be commissioned very, very soon, which is what we need to be looking at in looking at PIDA 2. We need our member states governments to be looking at such kind of projects that do not only benefit one member state or one region, one country, but the entire region. And then of course, in looking at the way forward in closing, I propose to look at the issues for reflection. For example, the implementation of various trade facilitation instruments, like the accredited economic operators at border posts or by our revenue administrations, so that different transporters, exporters, and importers are not subjected to stringent physical inspection, for example, at the borders, the same kind of scrutinizing and so on. Of course, the use of scanners at the borders, and leveraging on digital trade and other modernization, customs modernization instruments, and of course the single window itself, which calls for collaboration between and amongst several government stakeholders in trying to harmonize and of course bring about a trade facilitation using the single window. And of course, in doing so, it come up with smart border posts and smart corridors. So we have to take advantage of digital platforms in order to enhance trade facilitation. And then of course, we have to take advantage of regional programs by our regional economic communities. For example, the SADC transport and trade facilitation program. And then of course, the African Continental Free Trade Area operationalization, which would boost intra-African trade from 16% to 53%. As you may be aware, at the moment, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area is visiting Namibia, actually. So the protocol on the movement of people is going to at least assist also in curtailing the visa requirements. You find that this issue of visas in the region it actually impedes the movement of people and goods and services. And then, of course, we have seen initiatives that are coming up, for example, the COVID tech travel vaccine passport systems. And then, of course, in a nutshell, there's need for Africa to diversify its productive capacities through industrialization and structural transformation to boost intra-African trade and promote regional value chains. And then, of course, above all, we need an enhanced political will from our leadership. We need political will. We need our governments, our member states to be talking to each other to come up with these regional infrastructure development initiatives. Thank you very much, Mark.